Our next guest, the author and co-author of 12 books, including 6 bestsellers about American history. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin, and is the former Second Lady of the United States. Her new book, James Madison, A Life Reconsidered, explores the history of one of our founding fathers and earliest presidents, the intellectual driving force behind the Constitution, a true visionary in political philosophy, and the co-founder of the first political party in our republic's history, the Democratic Republicans. James Madison, quite a topic to tackle, quite a subject to write about, but Lynne Cheney is up to that task. And Lynne Cheney, we welcome you now to America's Forum. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, JD. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Lynne, James Madison, scores of books out about him already. He bears the honorific in our history, Father of the Constitution. Why now a book about James Madison from Lynne Cheney?
Well, he's really been underappreciated. You're right, he's had biographies written, but his reputation took a turn for the worse when Henry Adams wrote his life, wrote about his administration at the end of the 19th century. And ever since then, even though he is at least as much as George Washington, the man who was indispensable to the founding of this country, even though he was all of the things you mentioned, father of the Constitution, architect of the Bill of Rights, first president to take the country into war under the Constitution, people don't know much about him. And what they do know isn't as favorable as it should be. This is your man. If you want to find out why the founders believed that limited government was important, if you want to know why the founders believed that low debt was important, this is the fellow to know about.
Got to tell you, Lynne, the other thing that people don't focus on too much, when I was serving on the Ways and Means Committee and we'd be in caucus in the back room before coming out on the committee dais, they'd have the names of other members, and I looked there at one seat one day and there was the name of James Madison, who is a member of Congress, was on the Ways and Means Committee. It's interesting, it was an honor to serve alongside your husband when he was vice president, and of course we all lived through that incredible day and very tragic day of 9/11/2001. How was this book inspired by Vice President Cheney's role on that day of 9/11?
Well, it certainly brought home to us on the night of September 11th when we took the helicopter off the South Lawn, how perilous a time it was. The last time Washington had been under attack the way it was on September 11th was during the War of 1812 when Madison was president and the British burnt the Capitol in 1814. Madison was such a good president through that. He was calm, imperturbable. He was 63 years old and he must have spent 60 hours on horseback that weekend. He even went out to the scene of the battle. So, he was a great commander-in-chief as well as a great founder of this country.
And as we take a look at the parade of founding fathers, you mentioned the Henry Adams treatment that James Madison got, but in terms of history, why did other founding fathers, the presence of Washington and Jefferson and even an Adams, move in front of Madison? Why has he been eclipsed somewhat?
Well, I think that Washington and Jefferson, Hamilton too, were more dramatic figures. Washington would lose his temper. Jefferson was sort of this interesting, poetic fellow who had such a way with words. Hamilton was a little bit hysterical at all times. Madison was the calm, cerebral politician. In other words, he was both a philosopher and the man who knew how to get things done. I think in the case of John Adams that David McCullough, the historian, really has renewed his reputation. I hope my book can go a little way in that direction toward bringing home the crucial role that Madison played in the founding.
Lynne Cheney, I just have to confess here, for purposes of full disclosure, growing up, it wasn't so much in grade school that we heard about James Madison, but we would hear about Dolly Madison. And I'm not talking about the confections that bear her name, but Dolly Madison among the females in the early history of our country occupies a special place. What about James and his relationship with his wife, Dolly?
You know, he was struck when he saw her on the streets of Philadelphia, as many men had been. She was quite beautiful. He asked his friend Aaron Burr, I just find that so amazing, a little bizarre, that Aaron Burr was the one who introduced James and Dolly to one another. It was a perfect match, especially, well, in many ways. They sustained each other over long lives, but she was also a perfect political match for him. She understood the importance of bringing people together in great convivial gatherings at their house on F Street. He might sort of stay in the corner and talk to people as they came over and indulge in serious conversation, but you know, Dolly would make everyone happy. She shared a snuff box with Henry Clay. She wore elaborate costumes. She made everyone feel so good about both Madisons. And this was extremely useful in a time when the Congressional Caucus picked the nominees for president. So Madison had some competition from George Clinton of New York, but no competition when it came to how the members of Congress regarded him, not only for his own spectacular performance on the floor and in committee, but for the great hospitality that he and Dolly offered them. You know, it was miserable to be a congressman in those days. You lived in a boarding house, and one said you were stupefied like bears from talking politics all the time. So Madison, by bringing people together, won himself a lot of points.
Well, it is good to know, and some things about Congress never really change, do they? At least the common perception of many of us who serve or have served on the Hill. It's worth noting, and I have to put in a plug for one of the other books you co-authored with Dick Cheney, Kings of the Hill, about speakers, but the book we're talking about today is your new one, Lynne Cheney, James Madison, a book that we want to read. And Lynne Cheney, we just thank you so much for your time. We hope you will come back to visit us again real soon as you join us there from Newsmax, New York.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
So Lynne Cheney says we need to reappraise the life and times of James Madison. Have people gotten more interested in the Constitution and thereby the father of the Constitution? Why don't you tweet me at Newsmax TV, #AmericasForum.